to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn Nigara. Today on the show, I have Sonal Kotecha with me. She is the founder of Rumah Interiors, a Dubai-based boutique interior design firm. I have to say, every once in a while, the way an episode comes to be is kind of fun, and this is one of those. Sonal and I were going back and forth on Instagram and DM. She messaged me, and she was telling me about the lessons that she's learned from listening to A Well-Designed Business. She was showing her appreciation, and it was really a fun conversation. And then suddenly it hit me, oh, you guys need to hear this, right? Because she was so good at explaining the specific lessons that she learned and how they impacted her business. And so I knew that we had to share her with you. Sonal earned her bachelor's degree in interior architecture and design from Nottingham Trent University in 2007. She then moved to Dubai and worked as an in-house designer for a private developer, which was then a multidisciplinary interior design studio. Her experience led to her entrepreneurship and the start of Rumah Interiors. Post-pandemic, an influx of new residents moved to Dubai, and this resulted in many more projects for Sonal and her team. A well-designed business came along for Sonal just as she was learning that her old processes and contracts were not really covering what she needed to cover in these new projects. So before I introduce you to Sonal, I'd like to share a little love with our sponsor, Kravet. I'm wondering if you happened to go to the new Kravet showroom in High Point last month. They unveiled the Kravet home. Kravet has furniture, rugs, lighting, accessories, and fabric for every room in the house, including your outdoor rooms. The new showroom in the Steel Building is beautifully set up as a home, from the foyer as you enter all the way through the living room, great room, dining room, bedroom, home office suite, and the outdoor patio space. It's so fun to see the fabrics, wallpaper, sofas, desks, everything, all displayed as you would specify them in your projects. And to boot, the rooms have been designed by some of your favorite designers, Tom Felicia, Carrier & Co., Mabley Handler, to name a few. So if you are planning to go to High Point this fall in October 2022, be sure to put Kravet on your must-list see stops, okay? In the meantime, go to kravet.com and get your trade account set up today. You know, there's no opening minimum orders, no yearly minimums, and true trade pricing, so you can make money. Check it out and tell them I sent you. That's kravet.com. Okay, let me introduce you to Sonal, and let's see which lessons and episodes answered the questions she was experiencing as she was running her business. Hi, Sonal. Thank you so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hi, LuAnn. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited for this conversation because this is fun for me. Every once in a while, I get a DM on Instagram and we start chatting back and forth about whatever it is that you start the conversation with me about. And there's usually this one point where I think, oh, wait a minute, this would make a great show. Right? And so that happened with us. We were going back and forth. And at one point, you started to mention to me, you know, how many different lessons that you have taken from the podcast into your business. And so I said to you, why don't you go give it some thought? And why don't you list some of these lessons for me and let's think about having this conversation on the show. And so you did. You came back with 5 things that you've learned, and it was such a beautiful list and well thought out. And I am so grateful to you for writing, taking the time to write, and for listening to all of the shows. But I'm excited now today, Sonal, to hear it from you and to help you share these lessons with the colleagues that you have in the field. So talk to me a little bit about the journey and finding the podcast and how it has impacted your business.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm actually really, really grateful to you for asking me to do that exercise and, document the top lessons, because it kind of forced me to really go back and consciously think about the things that I've taken away, because I know I had started to implement some of the lessons, some on a subconscious level, some very consciously. And the time that we got in touch, it was towards the end of last year. So I remember it was actually distinctly the 28th of December, because I was doing the 4-part look back exercise, which I really, really enjoyed. And I really took a lot from it. And, and one of the things that I will be talking to you about is about that exercise. How, I'm not a big fan of doing things in Excel, but when I actually got to the end of the exercise and I saw what we had achieved in that year, it was such a great and fulfilling feeling. So thank you for asking me to do that, first of all. And yeah, like you said, then I went back. I spent some time revisiting some of my favorite episodes and even other episodes that I hadn't heard, and just I found myself really kind of listening more acutely to documenting the lessons that were coming out of them more consciously.
I love it. You said to me that the first episode that you ever listened to was episode 638. It was a What Would Lou Do episode, and it was titled Processes and Contracts. Talk to me about how you came to listen to that episode and what was your lesson from listening to it.
So that episode, yeah, it was the first one I had come across. So I saw somebody had posted about your show, and I just kind of parked it on my Spotify playlist to give this a listen. And I had some travel that was coming up, I knew, a few weeks later. And you know what it's like when you're traveling, you kind of tend to have a bit more of an open mind about things. You're not constantly distracted by phone calls and issues from site. So I parked it, and honestly, the first episode, I think it must have been serendipity, because it answered so many of the kind of reoccurring questions that were creating issues for me at that time. So I was in Nigeria at the time. We were there for my husband's offsite. I had a bit of time to spare, and I was sat in the lobby of the hotel waiting for him to come back from an event. So I flicked through the episodes list and I pressed play. And boy, was this lesson a huge one. And it's the first time I'd ever heard it be said this way. You had said that we, all designers, we need to stop promoting that one of the benefits of hiring us is because of the trade discounts that we can pass on to my clients. And I'm a little embarrassed to say this now, but, for 5 years, this was actually, part of my pitch. It was like the selling point of, why it makes sense to hire an interior designer. And I would explain to people, and it would always land well with them. And I'm not saying it's invalid, but, I'd explain that, if you're spending $100,000 on a space, and we are charging you, say, 10 or 20% of that amount, so to say $20,000 as a design fee, with the trade accounts that we have set up with the suppliers, they would likely save on average, they being the client, they would save on average that amount. So ultimately, they're still spending $100,000. But in that, they've had a designer to do the thinking, the specifications, and a lot of people actually, surprisingly to me, they don't enjoy the process of design, which boggles my mind because it's my favorite thing in the world. But a lot of people don't enjoy it, so it was always like, okay, this is a win-win for you, and this is why you should hire us, and it would work. But then when I heard this podcast, it just like it had, that the aha moment, the feeling shift in
Mm.
your stomach where you're like, listen to this for a minute. I think I actually had to pause it and be like, wait, this is going completely against everything I've been doing. But I think there's something here that I really need to listen to. And I realized that when you sell your service essentially as like as a discount, or you're helping them with their discounts, and you're kind of downplaying your own worth. And I realized that that's exactly what I had been doing. And, of course, if you downplay your own worth, especially so early on into your conversation, the same way that you think that your service should be valued. Um, and I just found myself being in situations over and over, and they manifested themselves in different ways and different forms. But ultimately, I think they came down to like, the is this client valuing what we are adding to their space or their project?
Mm.
And just hearing this helped me close that loop as to why that was happening. And ever since then, I've basically intentionally stopped using it as part of the pitch. And if a client does happen to, say, be privy to the concept of trade discounts, I just use that as a reminder that I remind myself to remind them that this, yes, we do, and yes, we can, but that is not what we're here to bring. Um, and in fact, as a bonus, I've actually found that when it's not been part of the earlier discussions and a client is on board and they go to make a purchase, and then I bring it up and say, hey, by the way, if you're going to buy this sofa from this particular supplier, tell them that you are a client of mine, and they're going to give you pass on the 15 or say 20% off. And then they're even more elated, and it just creates like a stronger sense of trust and appreciation between us.
So the aha for you wasn't that you stopped giving the discount away. It was that you stopped having it as part of the conversation up front, that the part of your value in being hired was for a discount, that now you lean on your value as the talents that you bring to the table. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. Yeah, completely right. So we do still have that. And now we look at it on a case by case basis and what the project, what the contract value is. But I'm just more comfortable with being transparent about those conversations now. I think almost before it was like a taboo. Now I'm way more comfortable to have those conversations and say, yeah, because some suppliers actually they say, well, either you take this as your kind of thank you, or we keep it, it's not going to the client. So
Right.
in those kind of situations, I don't feel any sort of like shame in just saying, well, this is just part of how the industry operates.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So now, we said in the introduction that you're in Dubai. So are there not is the furniture market different there, where you don't have access to stocking dealer prices and all the different tiers of pricing like we do here in the States? Like, how does is most of the work that you most of the furnishings that you provide, are they through more or less what you would call retail sources?
For the majority, yeah, I would say the majority of the products that we supply are through retailers. And over here, you tend to find different structures depending on who you're sourcing through. So a lot of the kind of mid-market retailers that we would specify, like the West Elms and the Crate and Barrels, so American brands that I'm sure you're very familiar with, they do have certain schemes. Previously, it used to be that you have to spend a certain amount before you could benefit from the trade discounts. And more recently, I think they've started to change their policies. And as long as you show that you are, a legitimate business, and you show them your trade license, then you can benefit. You can choose whether you benefit from that, or if that benefit is passed on to your client. But I think the key is just being transparent with the client and saying, okay, as part of the service offering, we offer this or we don't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So I want to reemphasize the original point before I pick apart something in there. The original aha moment for you, though, just to reemphasize it, because sometimes it is just a little shift in a mindset perspective, was that when you are in that first stages with a client and they're not signed on yet, they're a potential client, and you're including discussions like discount and this and that and the other thing, your experience was that it was setting up conversations throughout the entire process that often came back to in one way or another about discounting and what could you get from me and this and that. Whereas when you remove that from the conversation, it really changed the way the conversations went throughout the rest of the project. That's what you're saying is your direct experience.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
100%.
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very good. I love it. I love it a lot. Okay, now the secondary question is, do you have at least so you don't have like Kravet furniture, like Kravet doesn't ship to Dubai? Is that the point? Like you can't order furniture wholesale, you have to go to retail type places there?
We can also specify wholesale, but to be honest, the market here is generally quite fast moving. So the projects that we're working on, they require a much quicker turnaround. So it's not to say that we haven't sourced products like fabrics and materials from different countries, but generally that means a longer lead time. And Dubai, everything has to be kind of the biggest, the fastest. So there's a lot of the movement. There's a fast pace to life over here. So generally, the majority of things that we specify, at least within our company, we would give preference to locally sourced and locally available
Understood.
products.
Okay. Okay, good. And do you have an network there of maybe custom furniture artisans, people that have a custom workroom that maybe instead of making 40 sofas in a week are making one every 2 weeks, but to your specifications? Is that part of what's available to you, or is that maybe not the area of design that you are servicing at this point?
No, we definitely do have a network of local furniture manufacturers that we work very closely with. And, we've got kind of our trusted brands that we go to for making high quality furniture. But if the numbers don't add up, as in it's an economies of scale game. So if you're making a large number of the same product, then the price will probably be quite competitive against something that you buy retail. But if you're just making a one-off item, the price is going to be more. And the other thing that clients kind of need to understand, and what we have to do as designers, is to help them understand the process behind custom making something, which we enjoy doing and we're very happy to do. It does also add to our service fee because, the runaround that has to happen behind the scenes, there's a lot more that has to be done. We have to go and source fabric separately. We have to do several visits to the factories to test out the furniture that's being made, because often it's not something that we are replicating. It's
Right.
something that we would have custom designed entirely for that project. But what's really interesting over here right now, there's also a hybrid market, and there are a lot more local, really super talented design brands that are coming up with their own designs that don't necessarily mass produce, but they do have set designs, and then you can place an order with them, and your lead time will be somewhere in between buying something retail and having something made. So if you buy something retail, obviously it's an immediate turnaround and it can be in your home within 1 or 3 days. And if you get something made, it could take, say, 8 weeks. But you have these in between hybrid suppliers where you can place an order. It's somewhat customized. You can have a little bit of flexibility over the finishes and, heights and things like that. But your turnaround is maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And that seems to be doing pretty well over here right now.
Okay, interesting. Interesting just to note how business is different there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, very good. So I love that. So, and this, goes to any type of conversation that we have about understanding the power of words when you are in your sales presentation, which is what the discovery call and the first consultation is. It's a sales presentation, and understanding that the way you choose to discuss something will impact not just that conversation but many conversations to come. I know in custom window treatments for 100 years, like when we first came into the business in the early 80s, it was very typical. Every single ad that we would see in the newspaper, because that's how you used to advertise your products back in the day, would say 25% off, 45% off. And when we started our advertising at Window Works, we have never in 40 years advertised a discount percentage. We would say, here's a $200 coupon to use with $1,000 worth of purchase, or here's a $500 coupon to use with a $5,000 purchase. It's still giving 10 or 20 or whatever percentage off, but just that conversation around percentage off does invite a different type of consumer to answer
Yes.
the ad. And so that's what you learned as well. And so that's exciting and interesting. And I love when the words make sense and it all works out. So yay.
Yeah.
All righty. Very good. And then lesson 2 was you said that you couldn't remember which episode I said it in, but I have to tell you, you know where it is.
I know where it is now. After I wrote this to you, I realized that it's in the intro of
Exactly.
every single episode.
Yep, every single episode that, your ability, your talent as a designer is not enough to make you a
Yes.
success, right?
Yeah,
And
I
so,
literally slapped myself on the head afterwards. I was like, oh my God, how could you say you don't remember which episode?
well, that's so funny. Well, you know what? And I have said it throughout the different episodes as well, but it is true. And it is the exact reason for the podcast. It is the reason that I invented the podcast and came up with the idea for the podcast. And the reason that I do it is because my experience all those years with working with interior designers and literally objectively doing an analysis and really seeing the writing on the wall that their artistic ability, their talent for spatial color, all of the things was not the differentiator that created their success. And so you tell us your little spin on it here.
Yeah, so it actually really reminded me of a line that I read soon after I graduated. So you've probably heard of the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the quote in front of me. So he says that even in such technical lines as engineering, about 15% of one's financial success is due to one's technical knowledge, and about 85% is due to skill in human engineering, to personality, and the ability to lead people. And so when I heard it on the podcast, it just resonated with me because I also have always had that in my mind as well, that design as a technical skill, of course it's imperative to have technical skills, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee your success. There's so much more to it. So it was also had like a kind of flashbulb effect on me, like the lesson number 1. And I think that it was really important. This is like a really important point to me because I think when I graduated, so I studied interior architecture and design in the UK, and obviously it's a course that requires a whole host of technical skills. But I still feel like I left university and I was riddled with insecurities. I mean, I did well. I got a first class honors, but I still didn't quite regard myself as like the most technically proficient person, and especially in the early 2000s, it was like a rite of passage to be really great at doing technical drawings on AutoCAD. And it's not that I couldn't do it, I just felt like it was maybe a bit slower in pace to do it than other people, and it wasn't something that I necessarily enjoyed out of the design process. I mean, back then, and the same applies now, to be honest, blowing up details of what happens when you slice through a tile is not my idea of fun. And for anyone who is familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality types, I'm ENFP, and we generally have quite a strong need to feel excited by what we're doing, as well as we have quite a strong dislike for mundane tasks. That's quite archetypal for our type. So that kind of falls under that category. And then as I progressed after graduating into the world of work, I think that feeling matured into what I now know to be called imposter syndrome. And while there are still certain skills that I know I could do with brushing up on, I think now I'm at a stage where I'm more unapologetic about what I enjoy and what I'm good at, so that I can allow myself to play to my strengths in the same way that I would encourage my own team to play to their strengths. And I know that I love conceptualizing, I love creating a narrative, I love taking my clients on a journey. Whereas I have members of my team who have different strengths. Like one of them, for example, she's an architect, qualified architect by her background, and so she's great at detailing. So I know that when she's handling that side of a project, that we're good. Um, so yeah, I think I've just reached a point where I can now embrace my weaknesses in the same way that I can embrace my strengths. And I think at this stage of my life, like personally and professionally speaking, I think I'm better off channeling my abilities and position as a small business owner into finding the right people and making sure that they are equally fulfilled professionally as I am by providing them with a platform to shine in whatever they were born to shine in.
I love that. I love all of that. I love learning your journey through that. I love, first of all, the understanding that when you read that book at 21 years old, that it's a book with a lot of lessons in it, and to pull
Mm,
that one out is so critical. That you know 85% of the success of what you do in your career isn't going to be attached to the technical knowledge of being able to be a master at that career, right? It's, and
mhm,
in his words, it's saying it's going to be due to your personality and the ability to lead people. And when we think about the ability to lead people, when we think about it as related to interior design, it's not just lead your team. So if you're a solopreneur, it's not
mhm,
just, I don't have to worry about leading people. I don't have any employees. It's leading your clients. It's
mhm,
right. It's having that first conversation with them, and the client immediately feels as though you are the leader in the conversation and that they are going to be safe to entrust their project in your hands. And, it's funny because I've said often on the show, I expect you to do good design work. When I'm
mhm.
searching out for you, I'm searching for the person who is able to convince me of that, right?
Yeah,
That makes me feel safe in that, and that I get along with, right?
yeah,
And that has a similar personality. So there's the two things, the personality and the ability to lead. And so I'm so excited. And then your journey from really being technically capable but thinking, well, I'm not the best one in my class at AutoCAD, so maybe I'm not that good. And then finally, with the understanding where you are now, is that yes, we're not all good at everything, and it's
mhm,
okay to be bad at a whole lot of things, but let's make sure we know what we're good at and we lean into them. And then you hire people around you for the places that we're not good. Like you've got this architect where I love that you said when she's working on it, your team is set.
yeah,
That's the kind of confidence you want to have in the people that you surround you when you're hiring for your weaknesses, right,
yeah.
Sonal?
Yes, correct. Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of find people and put people on your team who can fill in the gaps. There is no point in having more people who are just as good at the same things that you're good at. And I think also that's a lesson I learned as I was in my kind of mid 20s. And I wish I could remember who had said it to me, but I do recall having a conversation with someone where I was kind of expressing these fears and being told, like, it's okay, like, you don't have to be perfect at everything, but what you are good at is finding people.
Mm.
I think one thing that's worked to my advantage, I would say, is like my background. It's quite colorful. So I'm from the UK, but Indian heritage, living in Dubai. My parents were born and raised in Kenya. My husband is South African. So I feel like this kind of colorful background helps me to connect with people from all over the world
Mm.
on kind of more deep and meaningful levels. So the kind of conversations I can get into with people who could eventually become clients,
Mm.
they have more depth to them. And I've been fortunate in that I found people who I now work with, and I consider like family, um, who are really great at what they're really great at. And again, I'm aware that there are things that they do way better than I do, and I'm very open about that. Like,
That's
I'll tell my
great. We
clients,
love that.
and I'll say, don't worry, but this team member's on it, and this is what they do. This is their forte. So we're good. So yeah, I've just started to embrace that more and more. It's not that that's been an immediate change over only recent months, but this is something I've started to embrace more and more. Definitely, I think in the last, say, 5 years.
Mm. Good for
Yeah.
you. Good for you. I love that. I love that. I love that. And it is something that it is so wonderful to see when a person has started to step into that reality for themselves, when they start to realize what their strengths are and to really be okay with what their weaknesses are and not to be afraid of them and not to be threatened when you have people around you who their strengths are your weaknesses. That's the magic. That's when,
Yeah.
everything starts humming and going along. And when the entire team is cognizant of each other's strengths and weaknesses. Now you're really, it's like anything. It's like a relay race. It's like, you all have a different, role in that race. The first one has got to get out the gate the fastest, the middle one has
Yeah.
got to trug along and the end one has got to get up. It's like you can't, if you're the guy that is the first one, you're not going to have the same skill set as the guy that takes the last spot. They're
Yeah.
different skill sets. But together, that's what makes you a great team. I love it.
Yeah. That's where the magic happens.
Yes, exactly, exactly. All right, so now number 3 is a phrase that your husband used, and I didn't tell you this, but it's so funny. So your husband's phrase is the best time to build an ark is before rainfall, and I have a little sign that sits on my desk that says the best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining.
Oh, wow. Yeah, very similar.
So tell us about this. This was episode 454 with Jamie Lieberman.
Yes. So as I was kind of putting my thoughts together about the main lessons that I've taken away from the show, and I was just verbally describing to my husband one of the kind of big takeaways. And yeah, he has a really good way of nailing things and coining phrases. He did say that he thinks he heard it on a film somewhere, but I googled it and I couldn't find it. So I'm totally giving him credit for that line.
Good for
But
him.
it's basically referring to strategically preparing for situations when you're not driven by a state of emergency, essentially. But in the context of the podcast, I was listening to the episode, the interview with Jamie Lieberman from #legal in respect to having strong legal documentation, so services agreements, partnership agreements, and so on. So after hearing that episode, I made a start just documenting the things that I needed to upgrade in our contract terms. And it's been one of those things that's always been lurking in my mind that I know I should give this some time and some thought, but there's always 1,000 different like actual things on the to-do list, like live activities relating to live projects that need to be addressed. So it's taken me 5 years to get to this point where I feel comfortable actually to say no to taking on new things. I'm keeping some space aside intentionally to be able to work on these things. So just last month, actually, my husband and I we went to Bali, which that's a whole other story. Rumor kind of formed while I was there 5 years ago. So we went back there, and I felt like I needed to reignite some of the magic that I was feeling when I first started the company. So in order to get to that point where I could travel, I had to start saying no to certain projects to keep that window clear to have the flexibility to travel, because I knew once I got there, it wasn't just to go on holiday. For the most part, to be honest, it wasn't a holiday, but I just needed like time and clear headspace to think about these things, because I hadn't before this point ever stopped at the end of the project to do what you call like the autopsy, because the to-do list was just ongoing. And I just felt like after doing my annual review at the end of last year and seeing the statistics that came out of that about what we had achieved, and then soaking in that new year energy that always comes through in January, I've really, really found myself spending more time or devoting more time to improve our contract terms. And there were some basic things which I had, missed out in my first version that I realized with some introspection seemed to be the root cause of a lot of our operational problems. Being very specific, one of the things that I didn't have in there was about how and when we could be contacted. So we would end up getting WhatsApp messages at 10 p.m. at night, for example, from a client saying, "Hey, I'm going to buy the light switches tomorrow. Can you give me a list of quantities so I can go and purchase them. And even though we had in our agreement previously that we were not responsible for quantifying, that's usually the responsibility of the contractor. It would just end up resulting in frustrations and kind of misunderstood expectations about what we would and wouldn't do. So I just needed to make it a lot clearer, and I have done now. I've beefed out the contract terms. Not I haven't made it full of jargon. It's very still quite colloquial, but it touches upon a lot more things. Like previously, it was a page with a lot of white space and some text. Now we've got two solid pages of text, but text that's very easy to understand. Say, hey, this is what we do, and also specifically, this is what we don't do, and then
Mm.
I actually make a conscious effort now as part of our onboarding process to talk clients through these contract terms to say, hey, let's go through these things. If you've got any questions, let's talk through them now rather than when it becomes an issue later on. And it's actually another kind of ripple effect it's had is in improving our contract terms and documentation. It sparked off this desire to improve the entire experience before a client even comes on board. So I wanted to make sure that the whole journey from when they receive our first services proposal right through to the contract document that they sign is as curated and thoughtful and personalized as the interior design service that we are providing. And I'm happy to kind of say that ever since we've started to implement these changes and we've got this new set of documentation, it's proving to be very effective. And I just feel like we're kind of going through like a software upgrade, figuratively speaking. And I feel like we're like now Rumah 2.0, and the hardware is the same. We're still the same passionate team of designers, maybe a few more gray hairs on our head, but we are fixing some of the bugs that were there before. And I feel that this is only going to continue to benefit the clients that we're serving.
I just love all of this. I love that you said that, we all know that feeling, right, Sonal, where you are just so busy at the end of every project and the next one has already been started. And it really is hard. It is hard to take the discipline to stop and to do the analyzation. And so I love it when someone like yourself previously wasn't doing it, is listening to the show say to do it, but you don't, and then the after effects of doing it. And you just finally decide you're going to do it. And then the various levels of aha moments that come when you review a project and you're like, oh, you see, if I hadn't allowed that to happen, then this wouldn't have happened. So do I need to make a revision in my contract in order to avoid that the next time? So is that the type of thing? That's what I was picking up from what you were saying, is in the review of things, you realize the different parts of your contract that needed addressing.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of just went with my gut. I still feel like that I've got a stage of work to do on this front, whereby I think I need to get it professionally checked over. But yeah, just doing this exercise and documenting the things and having conversations with the team that, okay, what happened in that project or what went wrong, and actually thinking what could we have done to prevent it? Because, I think it's our job as the service provider essentially to guide our clients through that service. And of course, they're going to try and do some scope creeping and cross certain boundaries if we allow them to do that.
Mm.
But I've just become way more conscious of off the back of this exercise of what we allow to happen and what we don't allow to happen, and politely just say, okay, this is outside of scope, and we can look at XYZ for you, but we will need to charge you for doing that activity.
Right. Well, and that's what happens. That is the whole point of all of the things, is when you have that clarity. It's when scope creep happens, when somebody asks you for something that, in the back of your mind, you realize you never accounted for anyway. You didn't account for how you would say yes or no to it. But
Yeah.
when you have it accounted for, when you have a clear agreement on the beginning and you've taken the time to walk them through it, when they ask you for something, it's like, oh no, you didn't ask for that already. So I can add it though. Right? It's like,
Mm.
I always use the darn restaurant analogies. It's like
Mm.
when there's a menu and you ask the waiter for certain items on the menu, you get them. And when the waiter comes back and you're like, well, what about the apple pie? The waiter just looks at you and says, well, you didn't ask for apple pie, but I'm happy to get it for you. Do you want some? Right?
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like it's clear. And it doesn't have to be uncomfortable, but it is uncomfortable when it's like, we have anything you want here to eat. Like, what do you feel like having? Oh, do you have French
Mm.
fries? Yeah. Do you have hamburgers? Yeah. You have soda? Yeah. Okay, great. And then you come
Yeah.
back, you have apple pie? Well, I mean, we don't have apple pie. That's extra. Well, how was I
Yeah.
supposed to know? Because you just said pick whatever I wanted, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And so I love it. And then give us a little bit of that walkthrough of the contract. So before, did you not have a conversation about the contract? You just like shoved it over and said sign it, or how did that work? And
We had a contract, but it was, let's say, very thin. It was a
Okay.
page of general terms, general conditions, and exclusions. And we did have a line in there which basically said anything that's not specifically agreed by both parties, but that was too vague, I realized. And a lot of that, like, I think I take responsibility for that. I think when I started the company, there was my first project was lined up as I was thinking of, okay, am I gonna go out on my own? So I just did what anyone would do, went on Google, put a document together, but I don't think I ever really took the time to sit and think, okay, is this the best we can do, until this year. And now I just think it's just so much stronger than it used to be. And our clients are a lot clearer about what is included in their service that they've appointed us for, and it just saves a lot of uncomfortable conversations that we have had in the past due to a lack of a strong kind of understanding and
Yes.
written understanding between us of what we are and aren't doing. And we generally used to find like the majority of the issues would come through in the implementation service. So we have an add-on service which we call post contract, which can be added onto our traditional services package or our e-design package if someone wants us to assist in actually doing the procurement and managing deliveries and things like that. But that was the one stage of work where we were finding the majority of issues arise, because we were not enforcing the boundaries that we had set. So in our implementation stage, we did say, okay, up to 15 or 20 hours of work. This is the monthly fee. It's on a retainer basis, but we were not really keeping track of how many hours we were spending. We were just doing again, because we're not just doing one project at a time. We'd be at any given moment doing multiple, 3 or 4 is our kind of happy number, and sometimes it would go over that, and then so we wouldn't have time to stop and document. But now it's become part of our process to actually record the time that we're spending during implementation stage, so when we hit that number, we can send them a message and say, hey, we're approaching the cutoff, and would you like us to continue? And then we can essentially offer them to purchase like a 5-hour time slot to finish off the service.
I love it. You see, and again, it's clear. Do you want apple pie? There it is. There's the price. Right? It's like, yeah, so you're coming to the end of your contract. And I love that add-on service because, again, from the consumer perspective, they're not necessarily thinking they're taking advantage. They just want the project finished up. So if they ask you to do something and you say yes and you don't send an invoice, that's on you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think anybody expected you to do it for free. I shouldn't say that no one ever expects you to do it for free. There's always that, 1 out of 10 people out there that's, literally trying to game it, right? But most people are just like, they're not tracking the hours. They don't know if they're out of hours. It needs for you to be it. This goes to what we said before, being the leader in the equation, and I love it. And I'm so glad that you have this clarity now, and that it has
Yeah.
helped your firm so much, in having the conversations. And it does, it takes the elephant out of the room, so that
Yeah.
it isn't acrimonious, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, hey, pass the salt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Terry Taylor says, pass the salt. Okay, I love it. All right, and then your last lesson, number 4, you said, came from listening to my year-end review last year, episode 721, 723, 725, and 727. And you said to me, you may not like it at the time, but you will like it once it's done. Talk to us about this. Oh, no, we have a lesson 5 after that. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So,
I think I have 6. I think
hey,
I had
great.
yes, there were 6. There were
Okay.
6. I told you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, you're right.
um,
Yep, yeah, you're due.
yeah,
Lesson 6 too. Okay, good.
yeah. So yeah, the 4-part year-end review series was probably one of the biggest catalysts of change for us as a company, because I've always documented the numbers, i.e., like the gross profit and the net profit, so a list of the outsourcing costs on a project by project basis. The one thing I was definitely lacking on, which I just touched upon as well, was actually documenting the number of hours that we were spending per project, and we're trying to get a bit better at that now. So we're definitely a work in progress.
Mm.
But by going back through things with the fine tooth comb and having this kind of curated exercise, again, thanks to you for coming up with this. But I found that I was able to actually tangibly put it into a document and generate some charts and statistics, again with the help of my husband, putting it into Excel, because Excel is one of my least favorite softwares.
I was going to
um
say, something I said was able to be put into an Excel spreadsheet. That's amazing.
definitely the questions that you were asking, or you had said, you know document the income generated by service package and source of business. So
Mm.
I went through from January to December and wrote down, I put like a matrix together, the name of the project, how many square foot was involved, how many rooms, where did the project come from, was it a referral, was it off the website, was it off Instagram, what type of service package did they choose. So we have like traditional service package, e-design, and we have also like an hourly consultation package as well. Majority of hours came through traditional service package, seems to still be the case. um, but the things that blew my mind probably the most was that in one year, last year, when we broke it down into like number of square foot, we designed over 56,000 square feet of
Wow.
space. And we broke it down into rooms when we did 141 unique rooms or spaces.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and so when you break, even I could not. Like those numbers, it took me a while to wrap my head around it. But then I went through it a couple of times. I'm like, could it really be that many? Like, how have we done so much? But we had, I think you just constantly go, 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 right? And again, if you're not looking back at the end of each project, these things kind of, disappear into the background, and all you're doing is looking forward at what is currently on your table that has to be done. So I was really happy to do that exercise. And the other kind of stats, I guess, were that we started off as a team of 3 designers, but by the end of the year we were 6. We'd added in like 3 on a freelance basis, but on a regular freelance basis. And at that point, when I was doing the exercise in December, we were based across 4 different continents and
Whoa.
therefore time zones. But we were still managing to work. And thanks to, well, not saying thanks to Corona, but because of the last couple of years and the pandemic, we have learned how to become more comfortable with working across time zones and working remotely. We
Mm.
were working remotely anyway. Like, I've never had a formal office space. I've always been, either work from home or work from site offices type before it became the necessary thing. But I think it did help. The last couple of years has really helped to teach us and a lot of people, obviously globally, to be able to be more comfortable working across time zones. And we've tried to use that to our advantage as well. It means that we can keep work going even if we want to be in a different country, which is, often the case, especially when you live in a country like Dubai, and there are so many places within, 7 8 hour flight that you can be still within a relatively decent time zone, but continue servicing the projects that are on
Mm.
the ground. So yeah, and I'd put it under that heading that you may not like it at the time, but you like it once it's done, is because like I don't enjoy documenting. I don't enjoy making charts. I don't enjoy Excel. But honestly, the feeling of elation at the end, and the sense of pride that you get once you look back, it gave me a very necessary or
Mm.
much needed sense of completion of last year, and it gave me a whole boost of energy for this year. And it's, of course, the reason why we got in touch in the first place through that initial Instagram post where I had posted saying that this was what I was working on that night. So I will forever be grateful to that series.
Well, I have to say, I love it. I love it because there is always in my mind two reasons to do this. The first is the hard cold facts, is that you have to run your business on data. So you definitely, if you're listening and you have not heard these 4 episodes, you probably should listen to them and definitely mark them to listen to them in Q4. But listening to them now will start you to get to understand the type of data that you're looking to capture. But the idea is that you want to run your business from data. But the other thing is what you also just expressed, Sonal, is that we need to take the time to acknowledge to ourselves what we have accomplished. You know, it is so hard to be an entrepreneur. It is so hard to be in business, and we all know what it's like to be running a billion miles a minute and just going from one have to do to another have to do.
Mm,
But if you don't take the time to look and go, whoa, I did that. We did that. Our team did that. Whatever it is, it is what you said. It gives you that extra juice to start the new year off and think, okay, because, at the end of it, it's a lot like kids. I always say the kids are the same way.
mm,
There's, one great moment for 7 hard ones. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like,
yeah,
right? But the great moment is so darn great. It's not middle of the road great, right?
yeah.
Usually the great moment is super great. And the 7 hard ones could be really hard. And that's the thing about a business. But I find that sometimes we don't take the time
Mm,
to look at that great moment and to acknowledge it because we are just running. Usually with kids, they'll just say something that cracks you up and you're just like, boom, and your mood
mm.
is broken and you realize, what am I going off the deep end over, whether the shoes are tied or not. Look at how adorable this kid is, and let's just laugh and put peanut butter on our face, right? It's like, like the kids have a way of getting in your face and breaking it, but your business doesn't. You
Mm,
have to pay attention to it, and you have to be the one to say, what did I accomplish? And then treat yourself to the acknowledgement of that. So I'm so glad that you have that in your business.
thank you.
Very good. All right, so number 5, everyone needs a VIN man. You learned this from episode 449, which was called What We Learned at LuAnn Nigara Live.
Yeah, this one was just it was a funny one because I remember listening to that episode and how it resonated so deeply. And it's also a shout out to my incredible husband who is truly my partner in every sense of the word. He's a software engineer by background, and while I know if I had left the interior design of our home to him, it would have looked like the International Space Station. He has really helped me to level my game, up my game, sorry. And I did start the business 2 years before meeting him, but in the last 3 years, he's been my sounding board and he's been my supporter, but he's also been my fiercest critic when he needs to be.
Mm.
And I think it's really important for everyone to, have people that they can turn to, not necessarily a partner like in a relationship like that, but maybe it's a business partner, maybe it's a close friend, but just having that person who can be your soundboard. And for me, he's really helped me in that he understands finances and investments better than anyone I know. And he's always there when I have like an issue from like client scope creeping and I have to kind of air things out and figure out a solution to technology failing, which tends to happen a lot for me. um, and I remember one episode where you had told a story about how between breaks during conferences, how you would be, a busy bee essentially, getting going for a shower, getting organized, and he would want to sit in front of the television. And it was just the dynamic reminded me so much of our dynamic. So I just started laughing out loud when I heard it because it's identical. I feel like we're like polar opposites yet symbiotic beings.
Mm.
So it was just to acknowledge that, I feel very lucky to have found someone who supports me and he's embraced the business in the way that he has.
That's so nice. I'm so happy for you. And it's true. It sounds like the two of you are like us, completely opposite in so many ways.
Mhm.
But as we talked at the beginning of the show, when somebody's strength is somebody else's weakness and the other person isn't looking to capitalize on somebody's weakness, but looking to balance it up and fulfill it for them, and the same thing to look in somebody's strength and admire it and call it out, it's a great thing. The only place where it gets sticky, and for Vin and I, we're 100 years married at this point, and he might look at me. It could be sticky in that moment. So what I think that episode you were talking about, I was probably talking about Power Talk Friday, because we
Mm,
usually have about an hour and 15 minutes between the end of the business day and the beginning of this nighttime celebration dinner. And,
mm,
that includes traveling back to wherever we're staying and then back to wherever the event is. And there are times when we literally have had less than 20 minutes in the hotel
mm,
room. And
mhm.
and in younger years he might have argued with me on this, but like here I am walking through the door of the hotel room, taking off one piece of clothing every, like, by the time I get to the bed it's all gone. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm going to hop in the shower." He's like, "We only have 15 minutes. You should just sit and relax." And now he knows. Like, younger he would have been like, "You should, like, don't tell me what I should do, buddy. Don't tell me what I should do. I know what I should do. I'm a lunatic and I need to go wash this stuff off of me so I can start clean." You know what I'm saying? But
Yep.
that's the thing. Now we're many, many years in, and thank God you guys found your groove much sooner. Where you don't tell the other person what they need.
Mm,
You acknowledge that they need something different from you and that
yeah.
they do things different from you. And
Mm,
that is really, really cool. It's like when you have those trusted employees that do things differently and you're just like, "Yeah, no, you don't want me touching that. We're going to have Sally do that cuz she's good at it." You
yeah.
know, I used to say to
Exactly.
people all the time, "You don't want me doing that. Kimberly's going to do that for us. She's going to do it better than me."
Yeah.
So yeah, so good. I'm
Exactly.
so glad for you. And then the lesson 6 is work life balance is key. And you reference this to episode 640, which was a Power Talk Friday episode with Ashley Connell, the founder of Prowess and the daughter of Tracy Connell, who is a big high
Mhm.
five and shout out to Tracy, my friend and designer down in Texas. So tell us about this aha.
So this one was kind of an abstract connection that I drew here. It was because I really enjoyed how openly Ashley was about discussing the origin of her business and how openly it was discussed that it was to help women balance work and family life as a goal rather than as an afterthought. And I started my company at the age of 31, and I wasn't with anybody at the time, so I was far from thinking about having a family. But I knew that, one day when it was to happen, I didn't want it to be someone else's decision as to when I have to go back to work. Here in the UAE, maternity leave is 45 days and paternity leave is only 5 days. And I think I just knew on some level that that was definitely
Mm,
not going to bode well for me sometime in the future. So I wanted to take the leap at that point, build the ark before the rainfall,
mm,
when it was not born out of like an urgent necessity to do so. Because I've never faced discrimination as a female designer or business owner, but I have definitely seen firsthand in my own close friend circle how a lot of them, my female friends, struggling with the dilemma of having to go back to work before they feel ready to do so. But if they don't, then their role might be passed on to somebody else. And it can be a big financial strain, obviously, as well, if a person doesn't go back and the job is not there anymore when they want to go back, so they don't have much choice. um, and I think that another big reason behind it is because my own mom worked two jobs when my brother and I were in school. And she'd always be talking about how much she couldn't wait to retire, which I think now we all know is like the antithesis of living in the present moment. And she didn't have much of a choice back then. So I feel like a sense of duty to make sure that with the opportunities I've been given, um, really by being born and educated in the UK relative to the options that my mom had, to have a bit more command over how we spend our lives, and starting with our own small team. And we're coincidentally a team of female designers, and my colleague has just had a baby. Her baby is 3.5 months old now, and she's able to benefit from the flexibility that's been kind of instilled in Rumah Interiors since we started. I want to make sure that she gets to benefit from it, because it was one of the kind of layers beneath why I was quite passionate about starting my own business. It's definitely not the only one. There are a lot of things, but for me, it's quite a sentimental point. But I want that our team to benefit from it, and then hopefully see that same benefit resonate to the next generation that come after us.
That's really, it's really terrific. You're thinking ahead. You're thinking about, first of all, 45 days just doesn't seem like enough time. I'm so accustomed to feeling like other countries have it better. Like in Canada, it's 1 year.
Mm,
It's 1 year that you have to guarantee somebody's job. And here, I think it's 3 months for most states. I don't know if it's all 50 states. I know New Jersey is 3 months, and
right.
but 45 days is
Mm,
half of that. That's
yeah.
that just does not seem enough time, and to be worried about your finances and worried about your job. And so, for what you're saying, Sonal, is that you started thinking prior to your having children and all of that, how you
Yeah.
wanted to handle it as a business owner, and you're now living that through with your own employees, even before you're the first person to, even before you have your first child.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Very good, very good. It's funny, Jenny Madden was on the show and she talked about maternity and the different ways to look at it. And she suggested the same thing that you've decided to do, is to just think about what your maternity policies are. First of all, understand what legally you're obligated to do, but then think about, do you want to do something more than what's the legal obligation? Like, what is the culture of your company and
Yeah.
how do you want that to be, right? It's very important, right?
Yeah, yeah. Just because it's like legislation, you doesn't mean you have to stick to that. I kind of had the conversation that it's optional when she wants to come back to work, and to see how comfortable she felt, and she was very happy to come back sooner, and so we are working together again now, which is great. But I think when you have a choice behind those big decisions, you don't feel any sort of resentment. You don't want to feel forced into anything, because I think that's when resentment can brew. So yeah, I think it's always been there. It's always been lurking
Hmm.
in in like the culture that I wanted to form for
Hmm.
our small organization.
So good, so good. I love it. And it's funny because I don't often ask designers on the show why they became an interior designer, but you included in your email to me the story about, why you're passionate about interior design. And I thought I would love for you to just share that with everybody too.
Yeah, sure, sure. So I grew up in the UK. My parents came over from Kenya when they got married. My brother and I were both born and raised in the UK, but we, like um, many East African Indians that moved over to the UK in the 70s, um, and generally culturally, we have like an extended family setup, but particularly so if you've moved over from another country. So um, my grandparents lived with us, as did my uncle, so my dad's brother. So we lived in a small house above a shop. Again, quite a common thing that a lot of East Asian families had. Newsagents. I'm not sure what they call it over in the US, but like small corner shops, like small grocery shop
Mm.
type setup. So we lived above the shop. We had downstairs was just like the dining room and a kitchen. Upstairs was the living room, my parents' room, and what we call in the UK the box room. And so for the first, I think, 7 or 8 years, my brother and my uncle were in the living room. My parents and I were in their room. My grandparents in the box room. And then when my when my uncle got married, he moved into his own house, like a conventional home. Grandparents moved in with him, and then I moved into the living room. And I think it's like at the time, of course, it wasn't something I enjoyed, if I'm being very honest about it. But I know that had I not had that experience of really craving my own space, as in those formative years, it I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I wouldn't have as much drive and ambition and such a huge kind of passion for interior design, specifically residential design. I think that's why I love residential design over any other kind of aspect of interior design, over commercial, over hospitality, because I think that the home environment that you live in is so innately important to us. So yeah, I grew up until the age of 18. The living room, or my bedroom, was essentially inside the living room, and then the first time I had my own room was actually when I went to university to study interior
Wow.
design.
Wow.
so so yeah, it's not like a sad story or anything like that. It's just the origin story, and
Right.
I know that it's still paying off to this day, because I
Mm.
do genuinely believe in the value of a well designed space. And
Mm.
I think it's more than superficial. I think it's really ingrained in us as humans to have, you know, to be happy in the space that you're residing in.
Mm.
And I think, especially over the last couple of years, that has morphed into a lot more than even it used to be. It's become our work environment as well. But yeah, I just feel very passionately, and that's kind of the reason why.
Mm, I love it. I love it. You know what? You are the epitome of the glass is half full as opposed to half empty, right? I mean, I hear that you have taken every lesson and every gift from that experience, but somebody could tell the same story and we'd all be here crying, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's not, it's not what many of your colleagues experience growing up, having the living room as their bedroom. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy to think of that, right? And so I have really, really enjoyed meeting you, Sonal. I just think that it is such a gift of this podcast for me to be talking to you on the other side of the globe in Dubai, and to have had the different people that have been on our show impact your business, and then for you to come here and share the lessons and then create the new ripple effect of an impact for other people's businesses. It just, I mean, I'm just smiling ear to ear, and I'm just so grateful to know you now. Sonal, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, LuAnn. You've really made a huge impact on me and on Rumah Interiors, and I will forever be grateful to you for
Mm,
that.
you're so sweet. How fun is that story that Sonal told about the first time she heard the podcast, right? That was a What Would Lou Do episode, number 638, on processes and contracts. I love that as she listened, she noticed that she was not hearing what she was actually doing in her business, and so she took notice. Since the start of Rumah Interiors, Sona explained to us that she would always talk to her clients about the trade discounts as being a benefit when they hired her. In doing this, she noticed that clients weren't appreciating her design work and how that this benefit that they get by working with her seemed to be what they were focusing on. Okay. And episode 638 helped her realize that she was the one who was setting up this downplaying of her actual value to her clients, right? And her aha wasn't necessarily to stop offering the discount, but it was to stop talking about that as the benefit to working with her, right? Because when she talked about that as the benefit of working with her, she found that all the conversations came back to, what kind of discount can I get? She ultimately learned through listening to that episode that her selling point, her value, the thing that she should be talking about and which she does now, is that she is valuable on the project because of her project management skills and because of her talent in being able to design the project, not what kind of discount someone's going to get. Right? So you got to think about that, right? Then the next lesson that she realized was that when she kept hearing my announcer intro saying that your design talent alone does not ensure your success. This is the literal reason why I started a well-designed business podcast. In my experience working with interior designers, I saw firsthand that a designer's talent was not the indicator of how successful they were. In fact, time and time again, it was proven out with every single designer I've ever worked with. And let me tell you, working with designers one-on-one since 1984, that is a long, long, long list of interior designers. And I saw every time that your ability to run your business, to run your projects efficiently and profitably is the single most important indicator as to whether or not you will ultimately be successful for years to come. This premise has not one time been disproven in all of the years. Okay. Now, lesson 3. The best time to build the ark is before the rainfall. This is a quote from her husband, right? And what they're referring to here is that you need to strategically prepare for situations when you are not driven by a state of emergency, right? Episode 454 resonated with Sonal when Jamie Lieberman from #Legal was explaining the importance of having strong legal documentation. This episode motivated her to upgrade her contract terms and make sure that that part of her house was in good order. Okay? Then lesson 4 for Sonal came from my 4-part year-end review series from 2021. Episodes 721, 723, 725, and 727. Collectively, from these episodes, she learned that you may not like it at the time, but you will like it once it's done. And what she meant by it was the process of documenting and doing things in Excel, because that isn't her cup of tea. But she found that once it was done, it gave her a great sense of pride and completion. All right. And how about because she did these exercises in those episodes, she saw that she designed over 56,000 square feet in the previous year. Okay. So here's my thing about that observation. I don't care if you design 56 square feet or 56,000 square feet. I love when you learn something about yourself or your business that surprises and delights you, that causes you to observe it and give yourself a moment of appreciation and congratulations, right? We all need to take this time to acknowledge what we have accomplished. As entrepreneurs, it's go, 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 right? But when we take that time to track what we've done and then look at it and acknowledge it the way Sonal did, it can reignite the flame, right? It can make you feel proud again for what you are doing, and it shows you how all of your hard work is worth it. Okay. Now, lesson 5 for Sonal came from episode 449. Everyone needs a VIN man. I love her shout out to her husband because although they are opposites in many ways, he complements her skills. And she talked about how he's been her biggest supporter as well as a finance and investment rock star for her and her business. So yay to him, okay? But I want to tell you, if you don't have a VIN man, understand you can hire this. Take the time to understand your superpowers as well as your gaps, and then hire for your gaps. Embrace the fact that we are all different and others will do things differently and better than you. This is okay. You don't have to be good at everything, but you do have to and want to. Surround yourself with people who do things better than you do. When you do this, you will build a fantastic company. And finally, the last pivotal lesson that Sonal learned from a well-designed business was that work-life balance is key. All right. What I love about this is that it got Sonal started thinking about how she was going to handle maternity leave as a business owner, even before she's on maternity leave, right? It's like Jenny Madden, who was on the show and taught us that it's our responsibility as the business owner to think about our maternity leave policies, both for yourself and your employees. Jenny explained we first have to know what we are legally required to do, but then she said we can also think about what we might want to do for our company, for the people in our company, in addition to what's legally required, right? And Sonal has seen her close friends go back to work before they were ready. She saw her own mom work 2 jobs for years. And she talked about how because of the opportunities that she has, being born and educated in the UK, she knows that she has control over how her team can spend their maternity time. And she hopes to create a situation and a company that eliminates their stress surrounding this very important period in a family's life. I love it. I think it's amazing. So beyond what is legally required of you, right? You can decide what to do. It's up to you. It may be nothing more than what's legally required. It may be more. The point is that both Jenny and Sonal make is to think about it and develop those policies so that your employees know what to expect and that you're prepared. Okay? We'll put Jenny's episode in the show notes too, along with all of these others. You know I love a good aha moment, let alone a half a dozen of them. So thank you, Sonal, for being so wonderful to share your aha moments with us. And thank you, too, for tuning in today. And I also want to say thank you for the recent reviews that I saw in Apple Podcasts. I do appreciate reading everything you say to me, and they just make my day. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Nigara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNigara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.